In the digital reality, evolution over revolution prevails. The QA approaches and techniques that worked yesterday will fail you tomorrow. So free your mind. The automation cyborg has been sent back in time. TED speaker Jonathan Wright's mission is to help you save the future from bad software.
Dude, so I will say, for first of all, ChatGPT has saved my life because I know we're going to get into AI a little bit, but at the same time, I will say it's not my savior because we've had a love-hate relationship with each other, ChatGPT, because it's helped me in my new job. And yeah, so I was released from NASA about last year, maybe in the first quarter of the year. And then I got put on, I found this really super cool job with robotics, and it's a commercial industry. And by the way, they're looking to get onto the European market. So this is a pretty good little segue for them. They're called Tompkin Robotics, and they've been really good to me. And but it was a lot of learning curve for me. But I will say that ChatGPT was super cool because I was able to get more familiar with it, and then it would help me in some of my tasks that I had to do, like working with TCP connectors using Apache NiFi, and it was able to help me get to a point to where I could take that code and then kind of put it into this processor and run it. But the funny thing about ChatGPT was man, you got to be careful with it because when you use it, it seems to omit things as you go along with it, and probably you know this, right? Yeah. And so you have to have a nice little like code, MS Code with you on the side there to make sure that you're comparing your code because it'll start to remove things. And the funny thing about ChatGPT is that when you start to use it, it'll go, "Excuse me, I found a bug." And then we start arguing with each other. I'm going like, "No, actually, you introduced the bug." And so it's really funny how it apologizes with you and it goes, "Oh, I'm sorry about that error that I introduced." And but it's hilarious the way you build this relationship with this AI. And to also let you know about Geekle, they came back to me. It was like last year, and they're thinking like, "Oh, we're going to do a whole like project using ChatGPT. We're going to have it write the code for us, and then we're going to implement it in production." And at the time, you've heard all these misnomers. I know you're shaking your head because a lot of these misnomers, people are like, "Oh my gosh, it's going to take over our jobs and everything." No, it's like a little baby, isn't it? You probably know this, right? It's like an infant, to where you really have to babysit it and then actually compare the code and have to kind of walk it through. But I will say, as a developer and even a tester, if you kind of work with it in such a way, and I guess at the level of your experience, it can really help you because it can provide you solutions a lot faster and it can ramp you up, right? I mean, it would take you longer to search like on Google or whatever you're doing, but it's able to ramp you up quicker on the technology that you're having to learn, especially when you're in a new job or something like that. So I just had a lot of people go like, "Oh man, it's going to take over your job and it's going to, do this and that." Yeah, I'm like, dude, no, it doesn't. Yeah.
No, I think that's it's really cool. It's kind of and it's kind of where I've been locked in a lab for the last, well, I say year, but really definitely the last 3 months. Because we've been building a platform called it was codenamed Synthetic Domain Expert because it was exactly that, right? Is the use case is, you're going into a new role, you maybe most of us know TCP, but we don't know the underlining TCP, 1 to 7, layers, and maybe, when we're getting into layer 3 and start getting to layer 4, and you're kind of going, okay, I'm not going to send this across TCP, it suddenly becomes kind of knowledge that you need to get from some other location, right? And
Right, right.
I literally drawing a slide which I'm going to do for the automation guild, and I really like it. It's kind of this this slide around on the left hand side. There's kind of data, and then information is kind of mapping of onto data, kind of some level of kind of understanding of something, and then on top of the difference between information and data, and then the next layer up is knowledge, where you're joining information and data together. Um, and I think that's the whole point of it. The whole point of that, and I use the word understandability in the sense
Right.
of what can a computer understand, what can a human understand, and the famous kind of build on that, and I've seen this on multiple different threads before, but knowledge is the relationship of information, and the nodes
Yes.
connect to the node, right? So, but what you've got and I've got and everyone else is kind of the Yoda landscape of wisdom, right? Wisdom is the
Yes.
connection through those routes that are the
Yes.
well-trodden routes, right? It's the reason why whenever you see some green grass on a corner is it's being walked across is because nobody follows the pavement, right? Or
Right, right.
and that's the wisdom that's applied with the understanding of expertise. And so when you look at your career in at NASA and
Yeah.
space exploration and all these different really cool kind of all the way back to Boeing and all other locations that you've worked at, you're bringing your wisdom and applying that on top of knowledge that's already there, right? It's already kind of
Yes.
implied in the project that you're working on, but it's your role really to navigate through that. And yes, a large language model or chat GPT gives you information in a different way than what you'd get with a search engine. So
Yes.
then you need to use your knowledge to interpret that. And then, of course, like you said, the journey you've been on, like it being a baby, is that it doesn't have that level of wisdom. So it can't, it can only do very simple tasks, which are very powerful, right?
Absolutely.
And they augment your ability to accelerate your way to go into areas that, of course, maintaining large amounts of knowledge where and information as we get older is harder and harder, right?
Oh,
So
yes.
so that's all what these kind of what I refer to as sources of knowledge or reference points are, is it gives you the ability to search for the entire knowledge of the world in a very simple string, but at the end of the day the constructs of how you build that string really is your wisdom and your knowledge, to kind of say, okay, how do I ask this? How do I create the right
Yes.
prompt and then do what they refer to as prompt tuning as part of that conversation to refine and I guess experiment. And you talked about that playfulness of finding bugs and stuff. Part of it is that contextual awareness that you're discussing about a transport control protocol, and this particular error message has come up. Now what do I do, kind of thing. And
Right.
I
Right.
find that fascinating, but I also think you're completely right, is that it's human in the loop, and it's really about how do you interact with computer systems in a completely different way than you probably done in the past. And yeah, there's a lot of buzz, and I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff maybe this year as more commercial platforms come online, taking advantage of this kind of technology, and then people using them more in their day-to-day job.
Right, right. And what's really funny, Jonathan, was the fact that so me and ChatGPT became buddies. So that we would be working on it, like a little snippet of the code, and I drop it in and it works. And then because I work in a teleworking job, remote job, right? I don't have anybody around me. And normally, like in your normal job before, right, before COVID hit, we all were kind of in the office. We all had our cubicle, if you can kind of visualize that, right? So here I am in my ChatGPT buddy now, and we get this thing to work, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it works. And I'm typing on the computer, communicating with ChatGPT, like, dude, we got it. This is so awesome, and you're gonna get me a promotion in my job, and it'll come back and respond like, I'm so happy for you, and now you can go get your promotion. And it's the way it responds back to you. And then you start thinking like, wait a minute, this is a computer that I'm conversing and building this relationship with. And that's what I said in the beginning. It's like it's like a rapid way of ramping up, right? With the knowledge, like you said, and then you bring in the wisdom because the experience you've got. But at the same time, is you have a relationship with this computer. And then it's funny you say that about what to ask it, because I'm working with this other person now in my company, and they're trying to ask it questions. And I'm like, well, ask it this. And because of the experience, it seems like you can get really down in the weeds and you know what to ask ChatGPT. And then you know what to expect. The more that you use it, the more you expect to what to receive back from it. And that's where it can really help you in your job, because it can be a very useful tool because of all the stuff that's out there. But at the same time, you just have to, walk it through to completion of whatever, project that you're working on. And another thing that was really funny, I went to my company and I said, just to let you know, I'm kind of starting to use AI and I think we should use it more. And I thought that was going to get pushback because one of these guys goes like, I can tell that you were using ChatGPT because they were asking me about something about the requirements and the way you can ask it for an outline, right? To kind of itemize whatever this task you have. And I think we should be brave, right? Go, yes, I am using ChatGPT. I am using AI. It shouldn't be looked as a weakness. It's to be looked at, it gives me a strength now that I can even be more productive, in my job. So yeah, I mean, it's got a whole bunch of different angles of looking at it, but I think that we should be looking at it now. It's kind of my buddy, but at the same time, it gives me another edge, right? And I think in my job task. So yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of put it as, I talk about human augmentation or really kind of this idea of giving you superpowers, right? And
Right,
I think,
right, right, right.
and I think it's completely right. I think people should be, oh, I've gone 14 days without using GPT. It shouldn't be seen as a negative. It should be seen as, why aren't you using this? And the quote that I always use, which is again isn't my quote, which is, you won't be replaced by another human, by an AI. You'll be replaced by another human using AI. And I think
Yes, yes.
that's the big one that I think, is 2024, right? And I think,
Mm.
that harmony of having that kind of relationship, and it very similar to her with, Scarlett Johansson, is that you have to build these relationships up. And also there is an emotional intelligent aspect to it. I kind of,
Mhm.
doing a talk on neurodiversity at the end of the month, and I kind of was, one of the topics is why emotional testing is important. The fact that people, users, are emotional beings and therefore use things in a certain way. And your rejoice of finishing a project and and articulating that is also, really important, because kind of a lot of what my ML guys do at the moment is they're telling me about just how lazy they some of the GPTs are getting, and to the point that
Yes.
they kind of have to refine the question from a prompt tuning perspective to really do things which they would never expect to have to put into the prompts, that are saying, okay, actually, I'm feeling really lazy today. You write me the rest of the code. Because
Mm.
actually, if you don't specify that axiom for a second, is that it will say,
Mm.
well, I can't just write all the code for you. Here's just a snippet example.
Mhm.
Whereas if you say to it, no, I'm feeling really lazy today, I don't want to write any of the code, I want you to do the entire thing, it will go, okay, well, here's the entire code base that you need. So, part of it is, the GPT, in a way, and again, this is the interesting thing about large language models, is that large language models, if you think of something like Instruct is a tuned version for conversational AI, right? It's for you to discuss it, and it has, in essence, a certain layering, which is more, I guess, emotional supporting, that allows you to say, actually, I want to get a promotion. Write me the smartest thing anyone's ever said about, this system, and it will do it. And I
Mm.
think people will have to start understanding that those personas, and you have to start a persona. You start off by saying,
Mm.
as a Gherkin engineer or as an MIT
Mhm.
professor, what's, I want my response to be slightly different. So I think part of, building that relationship with a GPT or a large language model, it makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
But then I think people, don't like to be exposed. Nobody wants to know that, they're asking stupid questions, but actually, this is the time to ask stupid questions, right? And I think,
Yes.
and it's also the time to kind of, have that certain level of vulnerability, right? And I think, um, we, taking it back, lots of things happening over the Christmas period. It's kind of, part of when you're starting your journey in your career and you're influenced by, my dad was
Mhm.
was an engineer from 15, 16. So he joined as electrical engineer. Was
Mhm.
always kind of very much in the kind of engineering background, very heavy kind of applied maths, electronics, kind of that was always his bag, right? And as far as he was concerned, it was very academical, it was very engineering focused. I spent a lot of time, the last session I did with Paul Gerard as well, with, going back to test engineering paths. And, part of it is you're on your journey. And for a similar kind of reason is that you learn a craft or an engineering, you follow in your father's footsteps. You kind of you
Right.
take a bit of that learnings and you apply it to your career. And I still feel like I'm very engineering focused. I'm very much kind of looking at it in a steer in
Mhm.
a similar kind of way to what my dad would have done, which is, let's apply this in an engineering context, not in
Mhm.
a kind of maybe in a different context, maybe in computing, where it's more of, I'm happy with the unknown states. If you're in chaotic testing design, for instance, you're kind of not that
Mhm.
bothered about how it works and more that it works. Whereas actually as an engineer, you're kind of very similar to what I'm sure you're like, what you want to kind of understand how it all fits together and how the bits come, actually at the lower level stack. So do you feel like, your your career and your engineering is down, is down to some of those kind of traits as well?
Yeah, and we talked about that, and we talked about our dads, and I just want to say that I really thank my dad because my dad worked at IBM, right? And it's really funny, Jonathan, because when I went to the interview he helped me so much. When I went to the interview at IBM, I talked to his manager and he's like, "Do you know this?" And I go, "No." "Do you know this?" "No." "Do you know about these protocols?" "No." "Do you know all this stuff is about mainframe systems?" And my dad calls me on the phone, I would say a couple hours later, and I go, "Dad, I'm so sorry I bombed the interview." He goes, "Oh no, I got you the job." And I'm like, "What?" It was so cool because he influenced IBM in such a way to give me that chance. And it really just led my path, in my life. Because from there, I learned so much from him. I learned his life. I mean, this guy was so amazing. He was an engineer, like you said. I believe he was part of IBM to where they would do the first kiosk for the travel and transportation systems for a lot of airline reservation systems. And I would just look at him in amazement. I remember walking into IBM, and I'm sure you got stories too, like these big buildings and all these mainframe and the computer cards. And all I knew about the computer cards is taking them home and making little houses out of it, stacking them up and everything. But as you grow up and you look at everything that, like my dad, for example, and your dad, how they accomplished, it just lays such a foundation for us. And it's funny you say that because I look back at my life and see how influential my dad was on my life because he was also in the military. So he was Marine Corps. And I remember getting up in the morning and he's doing reveille at me, get up in the morning, and it taught me discipline. And then it's funny you also say that to where some of the projects I had at NASA, right? I mean, we worked on Sophia, I told you that before, and we had to interface to all these other systems. And you had to be disciplined to be able to not only start the project but end the project. And I give my dad a lot of credit for that, showing me how to be disciplined to where when you start something, complete it because that's where you can feel the accomplishment. And now I see that in my life to where when I'm given a task, right? I want to start it, but I also want to see it completed. And that goes through the whole software development life cycle, because not only we just throw something out there and turn and run the other way, we want to also help support it, maybe. And that's kind of a new area that I've delved into in my new job, is into tech ops. So I'm helping the DevOps tech ops guys out, and also the development side. So all of that just to say how my dad was so influential in my life, from the military through NASA. And just to say, I spent the last month and a half with my dad. He passed away on December 16th, and I just got to spend that time with him and just reflect all that time. And it was just so amazing. And all these things go through your head to where you think about, wow, thank you, Dad, for everything, that you did for me. And it just good memories. It really is. And now that continues in legacy right now to my sons, because I'm able to try to teach them programming and see where this leads them into a possible engineering background, and just try to open the doors for them. So yeah, it's
No,
been great.
it's a wonderful story. And, I think, your career, with some amazing organizations on some amazing projects, I think it's good to reflect on that journey. And I think, the same thing we're talking about here around kind of quality engineering and, engineering, how engineering excellence for a second, right? And I love what you're kind of saying with the story and of the journey as well. IBM, the traditional kind of organizations, the ones that built the first kind of computers, and really
Yeah.
kind of put some of that influence down. That is foundational stuff that is as prevalent today as it was back then. And I think we kind of potentially forget this. Did a talk at, I think it was Google DeepMind quite recently, and I was talking about Web3 and Web4 technologies, and you look at it and you kind of go, well, Web1 is still as important, right? The foundational, I remember IPX before TCP/IP,
Right, right.
why are these protocols there? And you hear the Spotify stories of, well, they had to kind of reinvent TCP/IP. It just wasn't fast enough for them. Part of it is things change, but engineering kind of stays there as foundational principles. And I think it's interesting because we've got generations coming through, and there's challenges. That they talk about, well, their attention span's slightly different. And all these kind of
Yeah.
different things. And I actually think there is a blend there, which is strengths and weaknesses and opportunities. There's this new kind of post-DAL methodologies around shape, where it's all, it's now about kind of those kind of, how do you do betting, and then understand what it should look like, fail faster, learn rapidly, and people like NASA changing between CMMI maturity models all the time to be able to keep up at the pace of your SpaceX's, and the other organizations releasing at a lot higher speed, with, of course, higher failure rates, and a tolerance for what those failure rates look like. And it's quite hard. It's hard for me, to kind of go, well, I'm going to make the choice of the level of quality based on cost and speed, and having to sit within that triangle and make an executive decision. Do I want to release fast, at a cost, or do I want, a certain level of quality? Never shall all the three peers be there. And I think when you look at modern, you'd mentioned tech ops kind of approaches, and maybe looking at new ways of working, is that you kind of have to blend these things together. And I think this was partially the problem with the Agile manifesto, was this misinterpretation of working software over documentation. And, at the bottom, obviously stating, we appreciate the stuff on the right. We just value the stuff on the left more. Of course you would, right? Of course you value working software over documentation. But then, I have this kind of conversation when I was talking to Paul earlier this week, was around, in a way, shared models. Is that if you don't have documentation, you don't have models or blueprints or schematics of how systems are, then how do you get the shared understanding with other humans, right? There has to be some
Right.
way of exchanging knowledge between interchanging knowledge in
Mm.
some format. It can't just be working software, right? That isn't the source of
Right.
knowledge, right? And if you think about NASA and you think about some of the launches, right, there's been huge amounts of knowledge, huge amounts of of information, and people have had to make decisions that affect people's lives. And you have to feel that you're confident to a certain level of assurance that this is going to be a successful launch. And there's so many people and so many moving components and systems of systems of systems that the complexity is outrageous, right? And you kind of get this idea now of, oh well, we can, we're just going to land the shuttle if you're SpaceX or something, or we're just going to completely rewrite the ideas based on, yes, there's laws of physics in there, but we're going to challenge everything. And I'm not saying that any of these approaches are right or wrong, but I think it's interesting because you suddenly get this kind of this viewpoint of young, talented, old, wise, the stereotypes that actually are being rewritten, that you can actually, all work, on a shared problem state, and bring something of incredibly valuable input, no matter of experience level, age, discipline, understanding of domain. You can all share and collaborate, but you've got to work on a way of sharing and collaborating. And I think that's what's
Mm.
interesting in this new era, as I generally think the conversational kind of large language models have kind of put this premise of asking questions and sharing questions within a larger team within Slack or chat or any kind of other things with IRC we've had for years. The
Mhm.
frequency is just increased, right? Whereas you could have put a post on a news group on AOL or CompuServe back in the early
Right,
90s and
right,
got
right,
something
right.
back in a week, right? Whereas now you want that instantaneous feedback, which kids get from TikTok and all these other platforms, but they want the information in a very short, very succinct, because they've got, they want that information straight away. And this kind of
Mhm.
instant gratification viewpoint. But that same thing is coming into software development. They want an answer. They want to move on. They found an error. They want to fix the error. They want to get on to the next thing. They want to, mock things out so that they can not
Mhm.
have to work on dependencies of other upstream, downstream systems. They just want to, they want to be continuously productive, or balance off their work-life balance, which is always a challenge for us, right? And
Oh,
it's a
wow,
new
yeah.
generation. And I think that's the legacy that we're leaving behind in the software engineering, quality engineering landscapes, is the patterns and blueprints that we've used and tried, and new emerging patterns what generations to come are going to use in testing and automation and all these great kind of disciplines. I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say because right now there's another coworker and they made a comment to me the other day saying like, I really like working with you because you have all that government industry experience because I'm the old guy, right? And they're pretty young. They're probably a couple years out of college and they're doing a lot of that Node.js, Angular, React work, right? Which is kind of different to all of us, kind of old school people, because the technology's changed. But the thing that hasn't changed is the experience that we can bring. And I just want to say, you're never old. I'm just going to say because you can bring to a company something that they don't have. And lots of times, it's been our past experiences, and you know what else, Jonathan? Our successes. Because we've had success. We've had it in the past to where now we can pass it on to this newer generation, especially when they're implementing some kind of crazy, outlandish, connect this system and connect system in the cloud or whatever. And they're kind of afraid to push the button, to implement it. And we're like, I've done this before. Let me help you to understand that it's okay to push the button. It's okay to implement something like this, and or maybe their first code review or something like that. And you can kind of bring them along to the side and say, it's going to be okay, because of the experience that we've had. And we bring that. We really do. Because I know you've had a lot of experience too, Jonathan. And so they really do look up to us. And it's kind of nice to know that because you feel like you can really bring something to the table or to the project. So that's really interesting that you say that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I think that's the one around failure to launch, right? Is the we've
Yeah.
we've learned from our failures as well, and maybe we don't celebrate our failures as much as
Yeah.
fail fast methodologies are supposed to do, but we look at those strengths and weaknesses, and we're able to still achieve a shared goal, and I think you're absolutely right. Is that the different dimensions really bring things to get together and make projects possible. And I think this is why I think we've struggled for such a long time in software engineering, is that we've looked at creating a factory model where personalities and emotions are not supposed to be there. It's a
Mhm.
minimum viable kind of very kind of lean, just make a widget. And that's not the case now. We've gone from specialisms to generalists, which is always happens. And told don't be a security engineer, be a full stack developer, right? And
Yeah,
then
full stack, right.
and then you're a full stack developer, and then they say, actually, it'd be really good if you also specialize in site reliability engineering and chaos engineering,
Hmm.
or this bit. So they're kind of always, jack of all trade, master of none. And
Yeah,
then
right.
it flicks every 5 or 10 years backwards and forwards. And I think this is where, augmented intelligence is really interesting around kind of this testing kind of landscape. And, what we've been doing, tell you a little bit about the project we did is we realized that large language models, and I think this is what most people have realized as well, and GPT and all that kind of stuff is great. And we kind of we kind of pulled that offline and looked at creating a kind of an offline implementation of a large language model that then could bring in AI augmented testing capabilities, generative, prompt engineering kind of capabilities that everyone's used to, but focus really on learning about the system through
Mhm.
requirements engineering and lots of other dimensions of software development lifecycle. So more specific to testing, shall we say? And I kind of I joke about it, but part of it is when we started this process, we realized it was actually less to do with the large language model itself, and you could kind of think of that as a giant PK zip file of
Mhm.
archive
Right.
code, right? It's not it's not but it's a reference model of the world, right? And that's what's really interesting about it. It's like a large dictionary. It's like having a whole stack of dictionaries in your
Mhm.
library. Is that if you ask it about rocket science, is that actually there's not that many equations that to learn rocket science. You can when they joke about teach your quantum physics to your dog,
Oh my
actually
word.
principles are low, right?
Mhm.
They're very simple, but actually the complexity is huge, right? Because as
Right.
you read a term, thermal dynamics, or black holes or supersymmetry or whatever it is, right? You just get
Mhm.
another term and another term and another term and another term, and this is the the link between the knowledge. And then of course you have like I've got a couple of quantum guys on at my team at the moment. Is they're
Nice.
going off to using the wisdom and their knowledge to kind of go in and try and navigate through this. And when I brought these quantum guys on, the first project I started working was someone turned around to me, so you don't want quantum guys, you want astrophysicists guys. They're the ones that are going to be able to help you with this task. And I was sat there thinking, Jesus, you just can't, you can't get a break sometimes. But at the same time, part of it is about navigating through that matrix in a way, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
that is, a large language model is a way of, understanding the terms and that allow you to navigate the matrix. But actually, what is the matrix? And that is, the infinite problem is that what you're doing is you're extracting information, data, and mapping over knowledge. And so, quite quickly we started using knowledge graphs, and I'm sure you've come across kind of knowledge
Mhm.
retrieval for things like Neo4j and stuff, and start mapping out those relationships. And there's a lot of things like digital twin definition language, which takes that a little bit further and starts adding more and more dimensions to create models that are realistic, that are, you have the logic embedded into them. So you can ask it, retrieval questions, and it will understand dependencies of that knowledge and help you kind of guide you through the matrix a bit. But then as we started building on that and building on these RAG architectures, which are kind of retrieval augmented generation, part of the navigating the matrix is that you can obviously train it or tune it to kind of understand certain things more than other things, and so we kind of really focused on teaching it testing, right? And so in a very kind of neo matrixy way, is it kind of woke up and said, oh, I know kung fu in the same way Neo in
Right.
but we all know what happened in the Matrix, right? Is Neo then went in and Morpheus just kicked his ass.
Right, right,
It was like, well, this is ridiculous. I know 16 types of kung fu or 16 types of testing. You only know 7 or 8. How did you, beat me? And, part of it is, we know that there's obviously no spoon, but secondly, that part of it is that's that wisdom that the kind of the Morpheus character is has all of that experience that is the overlaying on top of it. And I think they also know how to bend and change that. And I think this is where we're getting to now, is that not just knowing kung fu is great, but actually you need the guide, you need Morpheus to guide you through the matrix. And therefore this journey into this new digital landscape requires a partnership of human knowledge and wisdom, augmented by intelligent systems that will actually help them, solve problems like you've been working on, on TCP. Even though we don't look at it at that state, is that actually these systems that are going to become, and this is why we're releasing this subject synthetic domain expert, is to know aerospace, to know 6G stuff. So the Apple Reality Pro comes out in a couple of weeks. Part of it is it knows everything about the spec. It knows true depth. It understands all the 3GPP standards for Wi-Fi 7, emotion detection. It knows all of this information, so it understands the boundaries between technology, the real world, and all the dimensions behind it. That amount of knowledge, couldn't be retained by one person or a group, or lots of single points of failure or thousands of community groups. So how do you harness that and then direct that into a matrix that you can ask the question of, well, not the infinite question of 42 and the meaning of life, but you could probably ask it, how to test this end device under test. So I think, this is kind of a new, exciting era, and we need these pilots to kind of navigate through the matrix, and also maybe even take the blue pill or the red pill. I can't remember which one was what, but and wake up to it all. So I think we're sending people on this new era of digital, kind of digitalization, or I don't even know what the word is, but I think we probably just created it.
You made up one, yeah, right. And what's funny, you say that because you think about it more, and when you start dealing with ChatGPT, I'm like, I'm writing the super cool method or whatever, and then going, hey, can you take my method and make it a lambda? Can you know what I mean? In a different kind of, like in a stream, and it goes, okay. So it's hilarious because we go, boom, it'll output that code to you and what you request for it. But then it'll go like, well, can I suggest this to you because this is more efficient? And that kind of goes to what you're saying. It's like, I might implement this code a certain way, but with that vast knowledge that you were tapping into, like you said, it's going to go, you know what, maybe it's better if you implement it this way, because, with all the knowledge that I have is saying to, and I'm trying to tell you or communicate to you, this is a better way of doing it. And it's that kind of testing that you said and the input that we've given it to where maybe it'll make things run more efficient for us, and maybe it'll help us when we implement something so that it'll explain the behavior. And that's another thing I was thinking, like, not only do we develop, but also we want to know the behavior of what we're developing, right? Because we're developing just this one little module, but then we got to take this module and we got to connect it to all these other modules right in the system. And then you can ask ChatGPT like, hey, I'm going to connect this to this thing here, this widget here, this here. What's the behavior in that? It's sort of like a long time ago. I'm going to build an airplane. Okay, but I have a whole bunch of engineers and they all work in these certain areas. It would be nice to know if I want to develop a certain wing and a certain angle, what's the impact of that? So it's kind of like what you're saying. It's like it can help me because it can go back and look at the knowledge from in the past and I'm going like, no, that's not going to work. Or yes, maybe the angle will work in that wing the way you curve it, or if you add a new flight control or something like that. So that's a really cool point, Jonathan, because you can see to where it can really help us so that we don't have to go down, let's call it your red pill. It'll take us down the blue pill. And the blue pill is maybe the success pill, maybe. So yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Or maybe it's just the realization, right? It's welcome
Yeah,
to the real world. Is that, and I think this is
real
where
world.
we're kind of getting to, is that real world factors actually are the things that in a way we bring to the table. Is the digitalization of a system, a one or a
Yeah,
zero, couldn't be simpler, right? But then we add quantum to it, quantum computing, and then you think to yourself, well, suddenly we've got a whole new problem statement. And I think part of it is it's okay to encapsulate complexity, and I think it's fine to know that there's so many different axioms to a particular dimension. So like you said, you're asking it, can you make it more efficient? Could you make it run in a 640k? What Bill said was all we need for memory. Could you run it, write it to could you rethink about writing it more securely, or could you,
right.
part of it is all these axioms are the questions that we, or dimensions that we bring to the table to then kind of refine this process and create this sculpture and make it more efficient, more effective, more secure, more ethical, whatever that dimension is. And I think that's where this kind of, and I guess this is what we're kind of invented, is this kind of community-wide enterprise collaborative kind of way of sorting a problem and a project out, but using AI to infuse tools, using these kind of all the way from PLM. I was
Mhm.
a automotive customer the other day who use our PLM design software that we build for testing and validation using XR headsets, right? So they're all looking at schematics of components or production components and looking at it from a computer-aided design kind of but specifically around product lifecycle management, around manufacturing. Part of it
Mhm.
is that they start all the way through the life cycle now. We're part of the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, but that is just one component of the physical plane, wing, hardware, the laws of physics, the real world environments and temperatures changing and environmental components, systemic failure within systems, chaos
Mhm.
engineering. There's so many different aspects. It's in a way we all bring something to the table to kind of to add to that dimension. And I think this is where I think things get really quite exciting for the future and future generations, is that they're building on blueprints, like your dad at IBM, built blueprints that he's explored, that
Yeah.
you've now explored, taken to Mark 55. If you think about it from a an Iron Man suit kind of thing, is that each generation comes in, and then sometimes maybe the generation stops, and that they don't need a Mark 55 Iron Man solution. Maybe Mark 1 or 2 is actually fine. I think part of it is we're on this engineering excellence view of the world, and maybe sometimes just good enough is just good enough, but sometimes problems to solving really complex systems, inherited knowledge from success or failure of projects is still worth retaining to understand and avoid for the future, in the same way that they may have tried to get you to do a history course and saying, well, you'll make the same mistakes again if you don't understand Julius Caesar, or
Right,
Oedipus, or some other kind of historical tale, right? We're
right.
just telling the same stories now, but to a generation which hopefully will then, take them and use those to navigate through decisions that they make, and based on information and all of these different kind of components. But I think it is very fascinating, and I know, I guess you're looking forward to kind of, especially this new robotics company that have
Yeah.
started to bring in things like tech ops and new ways of working to really challenge the norm, and work out what this kind of post-pandemic, working remotely and collaborating with, AIs as well as humans, as well as, robots, it's going to be quite exciting.
It's so crazy because I think the fact is that the first thing I did, I bought me my robot vacuum cleaner. That was the first thing, right? And so it's kind of like, okay, what is this thing, what we do, and we take it out of the box and we set it up and we program it. Yeah, it's going around and cleaning up the house, but we've taken that technology and now we're able to use it in manufacturing companies and distribution and space. And then on top of that, then you put AI into it. It's just an incredible journey that we're beginning to see that it's folding out in front of us. And I've also seen space exploration. Oh my word, I know you've seen that too, right? You go down LinkedIn, for example, there's so many advances we're making in space exploration, so many companies that are coming on board, not just NASA, but like you said, SpaceX and Virgin Galactic, just so many of them. And it's a different world, isn't it? There's so many paths that we can take now. And before you were kind of limited. And now it's just opening this big door to where robotics and AI and how maybe we all changed because of COVID, that post-pandemic that we're living in. What's funny to me is like Teams is huge now. I mean, we all collaborate now, don't we? We all sit there, or Zoom, we all sit there in a meeting, we share our screen. And what was funny, last week I was at an all hands conference with my company. But then when you see everybody, it's like you know them. And that wasn't like that before. It was like we all had to be on premises, we all had to be in the same location. But we're finding out that we all can function digitally, maybe, it's like he said, that we all can function and just collaborate in our collaboration, like using Teams or Zoom or whatever it is, and share our screens and do our work. And the production didn't slow down; it's increasing. And then with the other tools, like you said, the AI and the robotics and everything it's just opening up new doors. And what does that culture look like, Jonathan? Right? Because it's changing our culture at the same time. So that's a lot, I know, but it's exciting and it's changing our culture, and don't know what that looks like. And maybe it is the Matrix. It's the blue pill. We're all going down that path, right?
Well, maybe we are in the Matrix. That's the
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, quantum, right?
yeah, maybe there is just a very good quantum computer sat there, doing it all for us. But I think this was a great episode. Obviously, we're gonna get you on again, and
Yeah.
it's always great sharing. Obviously, we're gonna dedicate this one to your dad, but it was a fantastic to give the story and share kind of IBM all the way through to where you are, the legacy, taking over the legacy, and what we can share for this new generation, the generation to come, and yeah, I think it's really exciting times.
And I just want to say in closing that as I see that new generation come up, right out of high school, right out of college, they're looking at us. They're looking at all of us, Jonathan, and the experience that we have. And I just want to also say, like, help them out, right? I mean, to me, the more satisfaction now is not what I accomplished, but how I can help them, because that's the future. So it's a good feeling inside of just helping them on their new journey in life. So yeah.
I love it. Well, thanks, Michael. And as always, can't wait for the next episode.
Yeah, definitely. We got to do this more often because you always get me all fired up and excited. So yeah.